Hi, I'm David Kubala. In the next 400 seconds, I'm going to give an overview of the history of China. There's a lot of summary that's going to be happening here, so don't expect this to cover absolutely everything, and most certainly don't try to use it to study for your Chinese history test that's happening tomorrow. I'm running out of time for this introduction already. I just pounded a Red Bull, and it's 3 a.m., so
let's get down to business.
So there's not much known about the Shah dynasty. There's actually a lot of speculation about whether or not it even existed, because most of the information about it comes from myths and legends. But the idea was there were a bunch of clans that were living in relative harmony together around here-ish. I say relative because this was a lawless place and there was just a lot of murder happening generally. It wasn't until later that we really got laws in China, and thus begins. This is the first time that China had written historical records and solid proof that it was a real civilization. People living during the Shang dynasty were really into carving these things, which are the earliest form of Chinese writing, etched in basically any kind of bones these guys could get their hands on. The Shang really like making art and stuff. We've found thousands of bronze, jade, and stone artifacts over the years, but there still wasn't much government control, and for that we'll have to go to. Okay, well, yes, there was a government in the Shou dynasty. If you have 4 wheels and a bunch of metal, you do not necessarily have a car. These guys definitely had a government in a unified China, but they were essentially a bunch of small states at war with each other all the time. But just because they were constantly fighting with each other doesn't mean they weren't getting stuff done. During this time period, they figured out bronze, and the written characters became near modern. The empire itself, though, was very weak, and eventually it fell too. The Qin dynasty was really just Shou part 2. They took power from the emperor and kept on with business as usual. There was a lot of weird political crap like the horse and deer test in this dynasty that ultimately only made it last 15 years, but they introduced a standardized currency. It got started on the Great Wall of China, built a tourist attraction that a lot of Americans can't quite remember the name of, but then came. So the Han dynasty is probably the best known in Chinese history. During this dynasty, they expanded China into as far as Tibet. Even today, some people call themselves Han Chinese. It was founded by this rebel leader who fought the Qin until it collapsed, partially due to like 1,000 rebellions happening at once, and partially just because they sucked at being a government. The Han dynasty was doing pretty good until they took a little break around 9 AD, known as. Around 9 AD, the Han wasn't doing too great at being a government. Their emperor just kind of died, so a big family just kind of hopped into power, and everyone was just like, cool. The regime was quickly destabilized due to a bunch of disasters that happened at once, so the people who were still loyal to the Han got fed up and decided to rebel again, which really pissed off a lot of people in different places, and thus began. The Three Kingdoms period split up China for, I swear to God, like the 5th time now. China was divided between the Wei, Shu, and Wu dynasties, each which claimed dominance over all of China, even though they didn't have the military power to back it up. They were constantly picking fights with each other, and of course, with this much war going on, there was a lot of development in the form of weapons. The Han took back power for a bit at the end until they got overthrown, of course. I'm calling this one the Jin dynasty because in reality it was the Jin struggling to maintain control while literally everyone beat, maimed, and killed each other. The Jin did manage to reunite China for a short time. Because of how fast they did it, the entire country jumped directly into civil war. Surprise, surprise. Various rebellions led to it splitting up once again. For God's sake, can they keep it together for more than 5? So at this point, everyone is still in a brutal civil war for dominance. There's a lot of civil strife and battle going on in this time frame. In the north, the Wei dynasty eventually split into the eastern and western Wei, and then into the northern and southern Shou like it was a piece of firewood. The Liu Song was a little more stable, but it eventually got the knife too, and it split into the Chen and western Chen, until finally. The Sui finally reunited China for 37 years. When this guy took over northern China, his daughter married the heir of the northern Shou dynasty, but the heir died, so Jiang was all like,
This marriage is binding, and that makes me king! See? See?
They put a lot of reforms in place, like a unified code of law and government jobs based on merit, but unfortunately these policies were open to a lot of corruption and infighting, which led to Tang dynasty. Fortunately, there were less political problems during this period, and China was reunified into a proper empire. At some point during the Tang dynasty, somebody figured out that the boats they had lying around were useful for a lot more than just civil war, and trading with foreign governments became a main facet of the Chinese economy. But eventually people got angry enough at the government again to start warming up to the idea of having civil wars, and the Tang dynasty broke up into
human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Of course, at this point, China just fell apart in absolute chaos. I mean, just look at this map, the absolute absurdity. The north broke up into the Tang, the Han, the Jin, and a few others. The south broke up into a lot more pieces, which I won't even mention because I don't have time, but here they are. These dynasties were all very weak and struggling to keep their tiny piece of China, so there wasn't exactly much room for scientific research. Also, everybody was starving to death, but that's neither here nor there. Moving on. The Song dynasty turned the jigsaw puzzle that was China into a slightly less disorganized jigsaw puzzle, but in reality, the Song was really good at developing crap like compasses, paper currency, gunpowder, the printing press. It's funny how not making your people starve to death postage technology for it, but anyway, the Song produced so much food they didn't even know what to do with it all. It's really unfortunate how much the Mongolian Empire also liked having a bunch of food because they invaded and brutally murdered a bunch of people in Mongols took over China for a bit, and they got this guy to be emperor, and everybody liked this because otherwise you get killed by Mongols, which, you know, fair. They built this big new capital city. Ever heard of it? Neither had I, because they changed the name a while ago. They also built this big canal, and it kind of fell apart because there was yet another... So some dudes finally grew a spine and took out the Mongols. They weren't exactly good news. They formed a secret police. Oh, sorry, wrong secret police. That's better. They started to get suspicious of their own government and killed over 70,000 government workers. As much blood as they got on their hands, they were really good at making vases and walls. The last emperor killed himself and there was a revolution, and thus began... The Qing dynasty managed to take over and reconsolidate power for a good bit, but it was the last great dynasty of Chinese history. There was a bunch of stuff going on the west at this point, like the entire island of Britain was basically addicted to opium, which China had, so Britain did exactly what you expect, and they just invaded to get what they wanted. Sooner or later, though, they got kind of pissed at Britain, and the Chinese Revolution happened in 1911, and that leads us into... Okay, so the Republic of China is different than the People's Republic of China, and they ruled from 1912 to 1949, and they taxed their people like crazy so they could go around starting wars and take over more land area until the borders roughed out to where they are today. Then this guy wrote a book, some people got really into the idea and had a nice little revolution after World War II, which leads us into more recent history and... For the last 70 years, China has been a unitary one-party socialist republic, which is a bunch of fancy words that just means communist. There were some economic issues until 1978, but then they put some reforms in place, and since then they've been a really fast-growing economy. And I don't know if that's a testament to communism or human rights violations, but they're now a modern superpower in today's economy, breaking a GDP of over 12 trillion US dollars. And thus concludes the history of China. China has been through a lot over the past couple thousand years, from countless rebellions to economic prosperity to more rebellion to a world superpower. We're talking about a 3,600-year-old civilization here, which, if you're keeping score at home, is a really long time. I hope you enjoyed my ridiculous overview of Chinese history. I'm David Kubala. Cheers till next time.